Hi everybody, welcome to SAT 1 writing class, lesson 2 at A1 Prep. My name is Dana Lee. So today we're going to look at adverbial clause. Remember last time we looked at the basic grammar terminology like verbs, nouns, and stuff like that, and also participles. So this is kind of similar, adverbial clause. We're going to take a closer look at it later in the lesson. So the definition of adverbial clause, it's a dependent clause that functions as an adverb, right? So adverbial clause, that's like an adjective form of an adverb, and it's a clause. It's a part of a sentence. So adverbial clause, and there are 3 different types of adverbial clause. Like the first one is conjunction plus adjective, and the second one is when conjunction meets participle, and third one is when conjunction meets preposition phrase. So we're going to look at them separately and look at their examples. And then at last we're going to go over the simple questions together, okay? So remember that definition before I go on to the next slide. A dependent clause. It's a dependent clause. So it means it can't stand by itself. It can modifies a verb, like that functions as an adverb. So it can functions as an adverb, as in like modifying a verb or an adjective or another adverb, but it's a dependent clause because it's not a sentence itself. It needs to be with other parts of the sentences in order to make a complete sentence, right? So, okay. The first type of adverbial clause is conjunction plus adjective. So, what is a conjunction? Conjunction is a linking word. Basically, when you are linking 2 parts of sentence or 2 sentences, you need a conjunction. So, for example, coordinating conjunction. You might have heard of it before. Coordinating conjunctions include fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, and yet. So fanboys, yeah. So they are called coordinating conjunctions, and they can link 2 independent sentences. Like, I ate, comma, and I'm full. So here, and is becoming a conjunction that connects these 2 sentences, independent sentences. Okay? So that's the coordinating conjunctions. And other types of conjunctions that I can think of, subordinating conjunctions, like, for example, because, since, before, after, whether, if, as, they're all subordinating conjunctions. So you can kind of know what they are about, right? And the last type of conjunction is a relative conjunction. They always appear in pairs. For example, like both A and B. So both and they are conjunctions, and they always appear in pairs. Like it can't be both A or B, or both A or some other preposition B. It always has to be both A and B. So that's a relative conjunction. Also, whether A or B, not only A but also B, they're all conjunctions. So when conjunction meets adjective in the sentence, when you are ready, you can begin your speech, right? And why is this you are in a bracket? Because we can omit it. We know that the person of interest in this sentence is you, you know? When you are ready, you can begin your speech. It's obviously going to be when you are ready. It's not going to be like when he is ready, you can begin her speech, you know? It's not going to be like that. It's all about you. So when you are ready, you can begin your speech. So when it's too obvious, when some kind of fact is too obvious in a sentence, then you can omit it, right? You don't have to repeat it all the time. It just makes it the sentence more redundant and wordy. So that's always creating a problem. So when you are ready, you can begin your speech. And we just omit that. So just abbreviation occurred. Abbreviation of an adverbial clause has occurred. So now it is when ready, comma, you can begin your speech. And this is conjunction plus adjective type of adverbial clause because when is a conjunction and ready is an adjective, right? So ready is an adjective because it modifies a pronoun, a noun, a pronoun, you, which follows immediately after comma. So this is the subject of a sentence, and this is the adverbial clause. This whole thing is an adverbial clause. It's an adverb because it modifies you and your action. Begin. You can begin this verb, right? So as I said in the last lesson, what's the role of adverb? Adverb modifies another verb, usually, right? So that is a clause, that's an adverb. So it's called an adverbial clause, and it's made of conjunction and adjective, okay? Okay, conjunction plus participle. This is the second type of adverbial clause, and once again, conjunction, although this is a subordinating conjunction, right? And participle. Remember what participle is? It is a verb form of a noun that functions as either a verb, either an adjective or an adverb. So last time we looked at participle adjectives and participle adverbs, remember? And so here we're talking about that participle. And when conjunction meets a participle, like this one, let's read the original sentence. Although the speaker feels rather sick, comma, he will take part in the seminar. This is the original sentence. And, okay, we have the speaker here and he, and they are obviously referring to the same person. So that's why we can omit the speaker here in the bracket, right? So when we omit that, we're going to change the sentence into this one. Although feeling rather sick, comma, the speaker will take part in the seminar, right? So, why is this a participle? This one is acting as an adverb. Feeling rather sick. So this is actually an adjective form, sorry. Adjective, participle adjective, because this feeling sick is modifying the speaker. The speaker is feeling sick right now. So this is acting as an adjective. And although feeling rather sick, this whole thing is an adverbial phrase, adverbial clause, right? So the speaker will take part in the seminar. It's a good sentence, right? This whole thing, this clause is modifying the speaker that follows right after the comma. And also another change that we can notice is that instead of taking the speaker out, we changed he to the speaker because we have to at least mention the speaker once in the sentence, right? So they were repeated. So we got rid of one, the speaker. But it's better to have the noun than a pronoun. It's better to say, although feeling rather sick, the speaker will take part in the seminar, than saying, although feeling rather sick, he will take part in the seminar, because we don't know who he is, right? We have to use the original form, initial form, the speaker. So that was the first sentence, and let's move on to the second sentence. So once it is submitted, your thesis will be reviewed. This is the original sentence. And once it is submitted, so it is can be omitted, right? Because we know what this it is. It's referring to the thesis, right? So as I said, when it's too obvious, we can just omit that. So that's why we can omit this it is here. So it became, once submitted, comma, your thesis will be reviewed. So what was submitted? This one is like in a passive voice. So your thesis was submitted. So now it will be reviewed, right? So this one is an adverbial clause, again, and it is an adverb because it refers to the thesis and how thesis will be processed, right? It can be only reviewed when it's submitted. So it's giving some more extra information about the verb in the rest of the sentence, right? So this is the adverbial clause when conjunction meets participle. Okay. And when conjunction meets preposition phrase. So what is a preposition? A preposition links noun or pronouns and phrases to other words in a sentence. So it's kind of similar to conjunctions, but conjunction is a bigger thing in a sentence. It can do more stuff in a sentence, and it's more important in a sentence, can change the meaning. The preposition can only just linking word, like it can only link stuff, and it can't do as much as conjunction does. So prepositional phrase, said in short PP, made up of the preposition, its object, and any associated adjectives or adverbs. So this is a prepositional phrase. So when a conjunction meets preposition phrase, let's look at the original sentence. All the students are entitled to free healthcare service while they're in the UK. So it's obvious who they are. It's not going to be other people. It's going to be students. All the students, right? And all the students are entitled to free healthcare while they are in the UK. So that's the context. So we can change this by omitting this obvious part, this redundant, repetitive part. So all the students are entitled to free healthcare service while in the UK. That's how we changed it, right? And this one, while in the UK, is going to be the adverbial clause, right? And while, conjunction, right? And in the UK, preposition phrase. So as you can see, this is the conjunction while, and preposition is in. And in the UK is going to be the preposition phrase in this sentence. So what's the difference between conjunction and preposition phrase in this sentence that you can see? Obviously, while is performing a bigger role than in, right? In the UK, in is also important because you're in the UK, not outside the UK or at the UK, wrong preposition. So this is also important, but while in the UK, this is putting a condition to this former part of the sentence. It's putting a condition, or it can also change meaning. Conjunctions are like that. So that's how conjunctions are different from prepositions. And plus, conjunctions can be prepositions and prepositions can be conjunctions. There are words that are both conjunctions and prepositions, like after, before. It just depends on their usage, but it's not really important to tell them apart. SAT 1 writing is not going to ask you specifically how you can tell them apart, but I'm just giving you some extra information about them, okay? So that was the third category, the third case, and we're going to move on to the sample questions. And sample questions, I have 14 questions prepared, and I'm sorry that it's 14 instead of 10 or 15 questions, but that's how it happened to be. And number one, okay, pay extra attention to modifier this time again, and in this case the modifier will be adverbial clause in most cases. So number one, before signing up for next year's courses, the student's schedule must be approved by their advisors. Okay, so before signing up for next year's courses, that is the clause, and it should modify which subject. It's obviously going to be the students, right? So let's look at all the options. So A, where's the subject? Schedules. Schedules are going to be the subject of the sentence, right? And B, the students. So it's the right subject, so we're going to keep it. And C, their advisors. Advisors are not the ones signing up for next year's courses, right? Students do that. And D, the schedules. Once again, the schedules. And E, approval, okay? Schedules, and approval, all wrong. And they are wrong because they're not a human. They can't sign up for something. And advisors is also illogical because it would be students who sign up for next year's courses. So that's why B, the only left answer, is going to be the answer, correct answer. So let's read. Before signing up for next year's courses, the students must have their schedules approved by their advisors. So that's why B is the best answer, okay? And moving on to question number 2. So while driving down the road, the house with the large yard and a small pond attracted the family's attention. So while driving down the road, this not underlined part is going to be the clause. It's, what kind of clause is it? Well, it has a conjunction, and it has conjunction and adjective, right? So the house with the large yard, small pond attracted the family's attention. So A, can the house drive down the road? No. And B and C, A, B, and C, all three of them have the house as the subject of the sentence, and it's illogical, right? So that's why A, B, C are immediately out. And D, the family's attention. Can attention drive down the road? No. So that's why D is also not correct. And E, this is the only one that has the right subject, the family. So they were driving down the road. While driving down the road, the family was attracted to the house with the large yard and small pond. So that's why E is the right answer. Okay? 3. Although criticized by a few for her daredevil aviation escapades, comma. So somebody's being criticized, it's in a passive voice, and somebody's being criticized for her, it's a her, there's a hint there, it must be a female person, and her daredevil aviation escapades. So is she a pilot or something, I guess? So, A, most people, it's a plural, so I just said that the subject should be a female, single person. So that's why A is out. B, also most people. So that's not the answer. C, a skillful pilot. Okay, let's keep it. And D, Amelia Earhart. There you go. That's the name of the person, I guess. So we're keeping C and D, right? And E, also Amelia Earhart. So C, D, and E. And now we're trying to find the best answer. Okay. So let's look at C, a skillful pilot. Well, the problem with C, unlike D and E, it's just, it can be any pilot. It's just a skillful pilot. So, although criticized by a few for her daredevil aviation escapades, a skillful pilot. So it can be any pilot. And we're looking for a specific subject, and we need the name, right? And we already know that it's Amelia Earhart. But in C, the name is placed later in the sentence, and it's bad, right? So we want Amelia Earhart to be right after the comma. If we want the name to be placed immediately after the comma, IAC, right? So let's look at D and E. So although criticized by a few for her daredevil aviation escapades, Amelia Earhart was viewed by most people as a skillful pilot. That's a good sentence, right? So let's look at E. Amelia Earhart, a skillful pilot in the view of most people. So what's the problem? E doesn't have a verb, and D does. She was viewed by most people as a skillful pilot. This isn't a passive voice, but was viewed by. She was viewed, right? This is the verb. And the E, Amelia Earhart, comma. So this part is going to be describing her, a skillful pilot in the view of most people. Doesn't have a verb. This one doesn't have a verb, and the first part of the sentence doesn't have a verb either. So when we combine them, it's just going to be a fragment. It's going to be nothing. So that's why D is the best answer. So always look for a verb in a sentence, because without a verb, it's nothing. Though now one of the most famous abstract artists, comma, and, okay. This person is now one of the most famous abstract artists. So it must be a person, right? Because he or she is one of the famous artists. So A, B has critics as a subject. And it's obviously wrong because we are talking about a singular subject. This is plural, and first of all, it doesn't make sense because critics can be one of the most famous artists. They criticize arts. So A, B are out. And C, D, and E. So yeah, that person was Jackson Pollock. So Jackson Pollock was ridiculed by critics. Let's look at C. Once again, what is the problem? It doesn't have a verb. It's a fragment. Jackson Pollock was ridiculed by critics. It's trying to use a passive voice, but when we want a passive voice, then what do we need? We need a verb, like a be verb. So one was once ridiculed by critics. That would have been great, but it doesn't have it. So this is a fragment and it's out. And option D, Jackson Pollock was once ridiculed by critics. Yeah, this is how I just upgraded option C. They have was here, and now it's a complete sentence. D makes sense. And option E, Jackson Pollock, having once been ridiculed by critics. Having once been. So, having here, it's a participle. It's not a verb, it's a verb form made from a verb to have by putting an ing here, but it's not a verb, right? It's used as, it's modifying Jackson Pollock, right? But it's not, it doesn't tell us what he is doing as he's going through. It's just modifying it, it's being an adjective, right? So, that's why E is not the answer, and D is the best answer. So, that was question number 4. Okay. And question number 5. A review of the composer's new symphony called it confusing because of its unusual structure and its melodious final movement makes it elegant. Okay. Just by reading it, this one is kind of awkward. Can you tell? I can tell. Okay. It's because it's awkward because and here is not the right transition word to connect this part and this part. Because the composers, the review said it's confusing at the first time. But later it says it's elegant. So they are contradicting, right? They're contradicting opinions. They are against each other. So when we have two different opinions, but we want to combine them together in one sentence, then what kind of transition words do we use? Like, but, you know, or however. They're the right words. But and is when both are positive or both are negative. But in this case, it's negative and positive, right? So that's why and is not the right word. So that's why it sounded so awkward when I first read it, I guess. So and is wrong, so A is not the answer. And let's see. Although is okay, right? So let's keep B. And structure and. Just like A, this one doesn't make sense, so let's take C out. And while is okay, and but is okay. So let's look at B, D, and E, and let's analyze them closely. So, let's see. They all make sense, although, while, and but. So there must be other grammatical issues that we can probably find. And we have to find the best answer among B, D, and E. So let's look at B. Structure. Review of the composer's new symphony called it confusing because of its unusual structure, comma, although elegant by having its melodious final movement. Okay, so although elegant by having its melodious final movement. By having is so unnecessary and wordy. It makes the whole sentence really wordy. So it was elegant because of its melodious final movement. That's all the information we need to understand this part. But why do we have to say by having? You know, we don't say, for example, there's a beautiful girl and she has a really nice hair. So we can say she is beautiful because she has a nice hair. We don't say, oh, she's really beautiful by having her nice hair, you know? So it's, even when we're talking, you know, even in our everyday conversation, by having makes the sentence really awkward and wordy. So avoid that, and it's always bad. It's always a bad option whenever this comes up as an option in SAT 1 exam. So take B out, and we're left with D and E, right? So structure while having a melodious final movement that made it elegant. Okay, once again, this is wordy. Let's read this one and compare this to E. Structure, it's confusing because of its unusual structure, but elegant because of its melodious final movement. This, like, not even arguable, not even debatable, this is the best sentence because we can see a parallel structure here. In SAT, parallelism is the best quality of the sentence. When you say because of its unusual structure, then it's best to say, use that expression again later in the sentence and say because of its melodious final movement. Repeat that because it's clear what we're comparing, right? In this case, it's not redundant. In this case, it's good because it's parallel. You know what parallel is, right? They're going in parallel. It means this one always corresponds to this one, and they just go on like this. It's very straight and clear. That's why parallelism is good in SAT 1. So E is the best answer. D is basically saying the same thing, just like B, but they're all really wordy and they're not parallel. When there's a parallel option, then unparallel option is not even an option. It's not the answer. Parallel one is the best one, okay? So that's why the answer is E in this question. And question number 6, finding the Baltimore. Okay, this one, the whole sentence is underlined. So we can rearrange the whole words, like we can rearrange the whole thing and make it into a better sentence in this question like this. So, finding the Baltimore waterfront fascinating, all that there was to see was thoroughly explored by Antonio. Okay, so who is finding the Baltimore waterfront fascinating? Obviously this guy, this dude Antonio, right? And who explored there thoroughly? Also Antonio, so he's going to be the subject. Why is the sentence wrong? Because everything's written in passive voice. This was thoroughly explored by Antonio. Antonio thoroughly explored it. Just say it like that, it's better, right? So that's why A is not the best answer. And moving to B, Antonio found the Baltimore waterfront fascinating, comma, he thoroughly explored all that there was to see. Okay. What is the problem in this sentence? Antonio found the Baltimore waterfront fascinating. That's already one independent sentence. And this one, he thoroughly explored all that there was to see. This is another independent sentence. And when you link them, I already talked about conjunction and preposition, right? There's no transition word. We can't just put two sentences together by using a comma like that. We have to have a transition word. Like, Antonio found the Baltimore waterfront fascinating, so he thoroughly explored all that there was to see. Then it's going to be a perfect sentence. But then it's missing it's missing any kind of transition word, so it's not grammatically, we can't allow this. So moving on to option C, finding the Baltimore waterfront fascinating, comma, Antonio thoroughly explored all that there was to see. Perfect, right? So we'll keep it. The Baltimore waterfront is fascinating, and it's why Antonio thoroughly explored all that there was to see. It's wordy, but it's wordy. I don't think it's worthy. I don't think it's worth keeping. But do you know why it's still worthy? The wordy Baltimore waterfront is fascinating, and is why Antonio thoroughly explored all that there was to see. So in this case, again, they put too much emphasis on the Baltimore waterfront. We have to give more power to Antonio, right? Like in option C, Antonio thoroughly explored all that there was to see. Here, this Baltimore waterfront has too much power. This is why he explored all that there was to see. So this one's better, it's more clear, it's succinct, right? And E, the Baltimore waterfront can be found fascinating, and this made Antonio explore all that there was to see. Same as D, compared to C, both D and E are wordy. It's not grammatically incorrect, but they're wordy, and it has passive voice, and it gave too much power to the Baltimore waterfront when there is a better subject, Antonio. We need to give more power to Antonio. Antonio is an active subject. So finding the Baltimore waterfront fascinating, this is a participle, right? This is the clause, adverbial clause. So this word is modifying Antonio, which follows right after the comma. So this is the perfect sentence. So that's why C is the answer in this question, okay? So, question number 7. We have to, question number 7. Returning to Dayville after 10 years, the small town seemed much livelier to Margot than it had been when she was growing up there. So, by reading that, let's analyze the context. So here, Margot returned to her hometown, right? So Margot was born and raised in this town, and then after a few years or after a long time, she came back to the town, and it felt much more livelier, right? So, who should be the subject of the sentence? It's going to be Margot, right? Margot is the important person in this sentence. So, let's look at option A. So, returning to Dayville after 10 years, the small town seemed much livelier to Margot. So this is a participle, the clause, and returning to Dayville. Who's returning to Dayville? It's Margot, not the small town. So that's why the small town shouldn't be placed right after the comma. There should be Margot here, right here. So A, let's cross it out, and B. Having returned to Dayville after 10 years, it seemed a much livelier town to Margot. So, once again, it's not the best sentence. Okay, so it, here, after the comma, refers to the town, right? So, having returned to Dayville after 10 years, it, the town. The town can't have returned to Dayville after 10 years. There should be Margot. So B, for the same reason, B is also out. And C, after Margot returned to Dayville in 10 years, the small town seems much livelier than it had been when she was growing up there. It's a perfect sentence. Margot has the most power in the sentence because she is being the subject. And the sentence is all about Margot, so the sentence placed Margot in the most important position, the subject. And everything is in Margot's perspective. So that's why C is the best answer. And let's look at D. Margot returned to Dayville after 10 years. The small town was seemingly much livelier. Okay. So, same issue as the last question that we solved. It's a fragment. This one, and it's not a fragment, it's when two sentences are connected without a correct transition word. So Margot returned to Dayville after 10 years. That's one sentence. And the small town was seemingly much livelier. That's another sentence. It has its own subject and verb. Margot returned, the town was livelier, right? And it's just connected by a comma, a single comma there, and it can't be, right? There should be, if that was like coordinating conjunctions or other kind of conjunctions we need there. So D is not right, grammatically incorrect. And E, when Margot returned to Dayville after 10 years, the small town seemed much livelier to her than it had been when she was growing up there. Okay. Okay, so what is, it sounds okay. So let's look at C and E, right? So what is the problem? After Margot returned to, this itself, this part in C and part in E are both correct. But we have to put them here and see if that corresponds with the rest of the sentence. So then it had been when she was growing up there, okay? So it had been. What kind of tense is it? It's a past perfect. So it had been, it occurred in the past, and it's already over in the past. They all happened in the past altogether, and it's not even related to the present anymore. So, past perfect is here, so we have to find the right tense. This is option C and E have the same meaning, but the only difference is that C has the present tense and E has the past tense. So E must be the answer, because present tense, if this is the present tense, then this has to be the present perfect, not past perfect. This is the past, so that's why this is the past perfect, right? So remember, past, past perfect, present, present perfect. You also have to pay attention to the tense when you look at the sentence. So that's why E is the answer, because of the tense, past tense, okay? That corresponds with the past perfect. Number 8, lacking good instruction. Okay. My mistakes in creating a graph to illustrate historical trends were numerous. Okay, that is already messed up. That is not a good sentence. But anyway, lacking good instruction. So what is lacking good instruction? I am lacking good instructions, right? So mistakes can't lack good instructions. Mistakes are too abstract, you know, to lack instruction. So A out and B has I as a subject, so let's take a look at it. I made numerous mistakes in creating a graph to illustrate historical trends. It's a good sentence, so we'll keep it. And option C, there were numerous mistakes in the graph I created to illustrate historical trends. Okay, lacking good instruction, that's a participle. So I said this like 1,000 times already, but immediately after the comma, there should be the subject that the participle is modifying, right? So that's why it shouldn't be there were numerous mistakes. It's about mistakes. Mistakes is not a subject, first of all, and where is the modifying word? Where is the thing that this participle should be modifying? There's none, right? So that's why C is wrong. And D also has I as the subject. So let's take a look. Lacking good instruction, I created a graph to illustrate historical trends with numerous mistakes. So this sentence is ambiguous because we don't know if the trends have numerous mistakes or the graph has numerous mistakes. But it sounds like the trends has numerous mistakes because it follows, the numerous mistakes follows right after this word trends, right? So it seems like historical trends have numerous mistakes, which is not the intended meaning in the sentence, right? So that's why D is bad. And E, the graph I made, okay, lacking good instruction. Graph is not directed, graph is not given good instruction to do something. It's a person, right, that gets instruction to do something else. So that's why E is not the best answer. It should be, the answer should be B. Okay. Number 9, persuading even the queasiest of readers to spend hours learning about an extravagant variety of invertebrates. The effect of Richard Conniff's Spineless Wonders is to render the repulsive beautiful. So this guy, Richard, wrote this book, Spineless Wonders, and it's so interesting that it even persuaded even the queasiest of readers. That's the context, right? So let's find the sentence that contains all that information and yet is grammatically correct. So, persuading. So who's persuading? It's either this guy, Richard Conniff, is persuading the readers, or the book is persuading the readers. So definitely not the effect, right? Effect is abstract. It can't persuade the readers. So A is out, and B, yeah, Richard Conniff can persuade readers, so let's keep it. C, the effect, again, out, and D, Richard Conniff, keep, and Spineless Wonders, keep. So let's look at B, D, and E. B, D, and E, right? Okay. So Richard Conniff renders the repulsive beautiful in Spineless Wonders. Yep, it's a good sentence. I can't find any faulty part in that sentence. And let's look at D. Richard Conniff has had the effect of rendering the repulsive beautiful in Spineless Wonders. That's the same meaning as B, but B is much better. You know why? Because, okay, he has the effect of rendering the repulsive beautiful. So having the effect of rendering means he just renders, right? So why do we have to write it like this wording, when we can write it like this? so much shorter and so much more concise. So it's like saying, for example, say, oh, this light brightens the room. You know? We can say it like that. That's how B says this, right? And in D, it says it like this. So this stand, this lamp, has the effect of brightening the room. You know, it's the same context, but it's more wordy and unnecessary. If something has an effect of doing something, then that thing is just doing it. You don't have to use the expression having the effect of something, right? So that's why D is worse than B. B is better than D. Okay? And E, Spineless Wonders by Richard Conniff has effect in rendering the repulsive beautiful. Okay, so I said that the book can persuade the readers as well as the author, but it makes more sense if it's the author, not the book. Plus, even the rest of the part like has effect in rendering. This part just talked about it, right? You can just say renders the repulsive beautiful. So this part is again wordy. So if you can't really decide whether it's Richard Conniff or Spineless Wonders, the book itself, that's persuading the readers, then look at the other part. There must be something, it's an SAT 1 question, writing question, it's not going to be that complicated. There must be an error. There must be the best sentence that we can't find any wrongness, you know, like B. It's perfect. I can't say anything wrong about it. But E, I can say, I can at least improve it. Oh, well, we can say that this book renders the repulsive beautiful instead of saying has effect in rendering, you know? So that's why B is the answer. Number 10. Brought to the United States at the age of 13 to receive a Western education, his first book discusses Li Yanfu's childhood in China. Okay. So brought to the United States at the age of 13 to receive a Western education. So we're talking about this person, Li Yanfu, right? So after the not underlined part, obviously the clause, adverbial clause, there should be Li Yanfu right away, immediately after the comma. So first book, no. Li Yanfu's childhood, no. And subject of his first book, no. And Li Yanfu. Finally, D and E have Li Yanfu as a subject, has Li Yanfu right after the participle, the adverbial clause. So D and E can make sense. So let's take a closer look. Li Yanfu discusses his childhood in China in his first book. Okay, that's good. So Li Yanfu, whose childhood was in China, discusses this in his first book. So same meaning, but which one is better? D is better. Because you don't have to say whose childhood was in China. You can say, I spent my childhood in Korea. You don't say, I, whose childhood was in Korea, you know? You don't say that. That's not a common expression. It's just made to be wordy. So it discusses this in his first book. Why do we unnecessarily use a pronoun here when we can just like paraphrase it and put it in here directly? So this is not a good sentence. It's wordy. We can improve this sentence in many ways. But D, I can't improve it anymore. It's the best as it is. So that's why D is the answer. So question 11, serving as either business tools or recreational devices, computers, they're increasingly popular. It's an easy question, I would say. So, serving as either business tools or recreational devices. So what are we talking about? Computers, right? So obviously we can take B out because it's talking about their popularity, right? So, let's look at A. What's the problem with option A? Computers, comma, they're increasingly popular. Well, this one, it has the word computers, and this one modifies computers. But the problem is it has a noun, and right after it used a pronoun they to replace computers. And it's completely unnecessary. We can just say computers are increasingly popular. Why do we have to put comma and they there? Just to make it more wordy, right? So A is wrong. And C, they have become more popular. Well, we know that because we just read the sentence that they refer to computers. But imagine that this underlying part is gone and we just plug this in right there. Then starting as either business tools or recreational devices, they have become more popular. We don't know, just general readers, they won't know what this they are. At least the word computer should be mentioned at least once in a sentence, right? Because that's the subject. So pronoun, that's the problem. And D, computers are increasingly popular. That's good. Computers, comma, they are popular. Okay. So once again, just like A, using noun and a pronoun right after it. I said pronoun is used, the function of pronoun is to replace a noun. And we usually use a pronoun when a sentence is really too long, that we can't just like repeat noun again and again, so we replace it with a pronoun. But here, the sentence is extremely short, and we don't have to use they there, okay? So the answer is D. Okay, number 12. Raised in a large and noisy city, it was only when I went away to college that I realized how delightful life in a small town could be. Okay, so raised in a large and noisy city. Who was raised in a large and noisy city? It must be I, right? So we have to find an option where the subject is I, right? D is the only option. That's really easy. So let's look. It was only when I went away to college. So it's referring to the time, it's the moment. It was only when. It is when, right? So that's not the right subject. When is abstract. And B, when I went away to college. Again, raised in a large and noisy city. When? No, doesn't make sense. And going away to college, it's a participle, going away to college. It's a verb form that acts as a noun. But no, going away to college made me realize we want I to be placed right after the comma. So that's the only option is I. Delightful life? No. So this one is really straightforward. The only thing you have to do is just read the not underlined part, and you're going to find out that I should be the subject. And you just find that, and there's only one option that has I as a subject. So D is the answer. It's very straightforward, and it's more like a giveaway question. So, okay. So question number 13. Laughing because they had missed their stop while reading the map, the task for the tourists now was getting off the bus and back to their destination. So in this sentence, what should be the subject of the sentence? Obviously, the one who's laughing because they missed their stop, the tourists, right? So we can immediately eliminate A and B because it has task as a subject of a verb, subject of a sentence. Task for the tourist and tourist task. So A and B are incorrect. And we're going to look at C, D, and E. So what is the problem with C? C is not the answer, and it's because tourists now facing the task of getting off the bus and back to their destination, laughing because they have missed their stop while reading the map. It doesn't have a verb. The whole thing doesn't have a verb. It's missing a verb, so it's not a sentence, right? So it should be face, not facing. Because if we say facing, then it becomes adjourned, right? So D and E. Tourists nevertheless now face the task of. Tourists now face the task of. Okay. So the only difference between D and E is that D has the word nevertheless and E doesn't. So now what we have to do? We have to think whether this word nevertheless is really necessary in this sentence. Nevertheless now. And just now. So it's indicated in a sentence that this event, that they have to get off the bus and go back to their destination, this event happened as a consequence of the previous event. It's because they laughed and because they were reading the map and they missed their stop. So they happened, the relationship between these two events is already indicated in the sentence. So we don't really have to explain it by using the conjunction nevertheless. And plus, if we use nevertheless and now in a row, then it's like having two conjunctions in a row, and it's redundant, so it's bad. So that's why E is the best option. And last but not least, today's last question. Number 14, the protesters coming this far, they decided to insist that they meet with the president of the board before leaving the building. Okay, since this sentence is kind of complicated, let's go over the context. So there are the protesters, and they came far away. They came from far away to this building, right, to protest. And before they leave, they decided, oh, like, we have to insist to meet with the president. Yeah, since we came all the way here, before we leave, we have to see the president and talk with him, something like that. That's the context. So let's look at the options, okay? So, the protesters coming this far, comma, and they. There's a they after the comma, and this is a pronoun. And as I said, it's not good to use a pronoun when it's not really necessary. So it's not good to have they there. We already know that the protesters are they, and they are the protesters. So in a short sentence like this, we can just say the protesters as a subject, and then we don't need a they there. So that's the problem with A. And B, they, comma, coming this far, the protesters, same issue, they and protesters. In this short phrase, they already have a pronoun and noun. Noun and pronoun, they're bad. They're not always the best choice. Okay, and so let's look at C, D, and E. Okay, having come this far, the protesters. Okay. Yeah, having come this far, the protesters, they can't just go home. They need to see the president before they leave, right? It makes sense? So let's keep C. And D, to come this far, the protesters decided to insist that they meet. Okay, first of all, the tense is wrong because it's to come this far, and even the meaning is changed. It's like to come this far. In order to come this far, the protesters decided in the past. So they decided after they come here, right? They didn't decide it in the past to come this far, you know? So this order, the chronological order, is messed up because of this phrase, and it changed the meaning of the original sentence, plus the tense is not correct. So that's why D is out. And E, the protesters came this far so that they, okay. Also, the meaning is changed because we said, because of this, so that. When do we use that expression, so that? We use it when use it to explain the relationship between two events. So, I'm trying to think of an example of using so that. So, so that. I'm so full so that I can't eat anything, for example. Sorry, that's a lame sentence example, but anyway, you know when we have to use so that. So in this case, the protesters came this far so that they decided, no, just like D, they came here anyway, and then before they leave, they suddenly decided to see the president. So the tense is wrong. And because the tense is wrong, the meaning is changed. So they came here from far away from their hometown, I don't know, they came here by plane, and then they can't just go home without any, maybe the protest was fruitless, so they have to see the president before they leave. So C is the only thing that makes sense. Having come this far, they already came, and the protesters can't go home. They decided to insist that they meet with the president before they leave the building, right? So this one, C, is the one that makes sense. Only one that makes sense. So C is the answer. And that was my last question. And thank you.